why do you have IBS? It's really important that you figure out the why behind the syndrome, because that is how you make progress. That's how you change things. That's how I went from having awful IBS for a decade to it disappearing and not being an issue anymore. The way that you get rid of all the bloating, bowel drama is by understanding the why. And there are so many reasons for IBS. You might have felt fobbed off. You might have been told there's nothing you can do. That's not true, but you first need to uncover some of the reasons. And I'm going to share with you some of what those reasons are. Some of them you'll have heard, some of them you'll have never thought about before, but they make a huge difference to your gut health. Let's go. So having IBS is about as much fun as that school drop-off that I just did in the storm and peeing rain. Like, it's like there's no point in getting ready this morning. I'm just soaking. Time for a cup of tea and then let's sit down. So while this is not the most flattering angle, we're going to go with it. I'll give you a bit of a backstory first of my own experience with IBS. So I was diagnosed officially with IBS when I was about like 16 or 17 and tried lots of different things, tried the various medications that can be given for that, and nothing really helped. It got worse and worse and worse. So for me, my IBS primarily looked like IBS-D, so it's kind of diarrhea side with a lot of pain, and there was also a lot of health issues going on. So it really impacted my whole life. It felt like my whole life was just me being anxious and thinking about like toilet trips and if I was going to be really bloated and all of these kinds of things. So for me, IBS wasn't just this like occasional thing, it was a daily problem. And also there was loads of other health issues, as is often the case with IBS. Because your gut health and gut microbiome has such a big impact in your mood, in your skin health, in your energies, in your hormones, in your brain health, so many aspects. So I got to the point where I was like, doctors tested me for celiac disease, Crohn's disease, all sorts of irritable bowel disease. They had so many tests done. Nothing was helping me. Nothing was giving answers. So that's when I kind of entered into a more holistic functional medicine approach. And now, I don't know, 15 years later, I haven't lived with IBS for like 10 years. And it is brilliant. Life is so much better when you get rid of IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. And the way you get rid of it is by figuring out what the root cause is, the why behind it. You don't just randomly have insane constipation and bloating. Those are all symptoms of a deeper issue going on. So if you want to get rid of it, then you just need to figure out what those issues are. And that's what we're going to dive into. Kind of think of this as part one, because there's actually a lot of things that can be going on. But I want to share with you the things I see most common in my clinical practice as a holistic nutritionist and with the hundreds of clients I've seen over the last 10 years. And I've dealt a lot of with people with IBS and helping them go from having suffered with IBS for like multiple decades to the point where they are IBS free and living the dream. So let's dive in. So irritable bowel syndrome, it's really best to think about that as an umbrella term for a whole cluster of different symptoms. It's a bit like polycystic ovarian syndrome. It's really about lots of various symptoms. What the doctor will do, they'll rule out irritable bowel disease, Crohn's, colitis, diverticulitis, and then what you'll be left with is irritable bowel syndrome, where they know there's not these kind of high inflammatory markers picked up hopefully in the stool testing that they do for you, but there is obviously symptoms that you're having. So when we're talking about IBS, we're actually talking about something that's really personalized for each of us. And so in order to figure out and get rid of your IBS, you need to understand what your unique reasons are for it. So let's dive in with the first reason. This is something I see all the time. So with my clients, especially if their main goal in working together is to deal with IBS, one of the things we're going to do, or very highly likely do, is run a really comprehensive stool test. So really getting a snapshot of your gut microbiome. Because like I said, we're not looking for a diagnosis here. When people come to me or they have IBS, we know there's not any of these other conditions going on, but they're obviously struggling. And so what we want to run tests for is to figure out get a snapshot, like a photo of the gut microbiome. What's happening? What bacteria is there? What yeasts are there? What parasites might be there? Like, what is going on in the gut? And getting some good comprehensive stool testing can be really, really helpful. And the thing I see time and time again with people that have had really awful IBS symptoms, whether it's IBS-C, IBS-D, combination, all of the things, is that there'll be some sort of bacterial or fungal overgrowth. So commonly this can be in the small intestine, so that would be SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or small intestinal fungal overgrowth, SIFO, or IMO, intestinal methane overgrowth. So that would be a disruption in the microbiome in this small intestine. You would test for SIBO specifically through a breath test. That wouldn't necessarily come through in the stool test that I do. But that's only one part of the overgrowth. The other thing that can happen is that there's bacterial overgrowth in that large intestine. That's what the stool test is really going to pick up on. But that's all just details. Basically, when there's some overgrowth, there's some imbalance in the gut microbiome of bacteria, of yeast, meaning there's potentially a type of bacteria there that shouldn't be there, a pathogenic bacteria that we know from research should not be within the ecosystem, within the gut microbiome, is established itself. So another way, or the way I describe it a lot to clients, is really thinking about it like a garden. It's like you have the soil of your garden, you've got lots of weeds in there, you've got lots of plant species and stuff that's just been landed on the soil that shouldn't be there. So obviously you're not going to have a healthy garden if the soil isn't very good. So one of the big reasons for this, or for IBS, is this imbalance, and often these pathogenic yeasts or bacteria that come into your gut, grow and establish themselves in this ecosystem. And the reason that's problematic is they can create a lot of different byproducts. So certain bacteria that can be in your gut might produce more gases that create more bloating. They might also change the pH, or often they do change the pH of your gut microbiome, of your intestines. And maintaining a healthy pH is really important because certain chemical reactions require a specific pH. So meaning acid alkalinity, and you want actually in your large intestine slightly more to the acidic side rather than too alkali. I had a client recently whose microbiome stool test results were showing her intestines, her results were really alkali, and that was really problematic. So don't believe all this nonsense out there of like alkali bodies. No. Your body is a mixture of both acidic and alkali. So that is one of the big things when it comes to IBS and that was the case for me. I had both a yeast overgrowth and a bacterial overgrowth, and to top it off, I had 2 types of parasites as well. And honestly, when I got my stool test results, I cried with relief, even though that wasn't a great presentation. Just after a decade of being kind of fobbed off and told it was because I'm anxious and stressed, that's why I have IBS, to actually discover, oh, this is the reason, it was so relieving, because once you know what the reason is, you can do something about it, which is so reassuring. You can actually feel empowered to be like, oh, okay, I can change this. So that is a big part. I've gone over that really quickly. There's a lot of nuance and detail within that. Lots of different presentations. Obviously, you can have overgrowth in the small intestine, you can have it in the large intestine. Those both present quite differently. There's a whole lot of complexity there. But if there's IBS going on and it's gone on for a long time, there may be some sort of yeast or bacterial overgrowth within your gut that's driving bloating, symptoms, disruption, dysfunction, and ultimately impacting how much you're absorbing of how much of the food you are absorbing. So let's move on to number 2. The moon. Okay, the next thing that I see all the time with clients and when I'm looking through their test results is kind of the opposite of number 1, is when they have a low amount or poor diversity of all the beneficial bacteria that they have in the gut. So a healthy gut is made up of lots of different bacteria. And it's first, just on a side tangent, but I want to clarify, the reason we have good bacteria in the gut is because of what they do, the functions, the things that they make. So to just simplify and focus on one thing, the reason we want lots of good beneficial bacteria in your gut microbiome, one of the reasons anyway, is because of what they produce. What they produce is short chain fatty acids, butyrate being an example of that, and the incredible anti-inflammatory beneficial aspect that has on your gut health, on your brain health, on inflammation levels, on the whole body. So when we're talking about good bacteria in the gut, it's not just for like the sake of it, it's because they actually perform a lot of really important actions. And one of the reasons people can have IBS is because maybe, like me, I had tons of antibiotics as a child, and all of that really reduced the diversity of the good bacteria in my gut. Plus add in some trauma and adverse childhood events. Again, we know that's going to reduce chronic stress. Trauma, adverse childhood events are really going to impact the diversity and state of your gut microbiome. So one of the reasons is that poor diversity. Now this can come from antibiotics like I talked about. It can also come from things like being on the pill for a really long period of time, having health issues, certain medications can all reduce the diversity. So I'm thinking of another client, came to me, a lot of gut issues, but it's because she'd actually first started off having loads of UTIs. And so she had like 3 or 4 back-to-back rounds of antibiotics to get rid of the UTIs, didn't really get rid of it, but then she started to get loads of gut issues because she had kind of essentially removed a lot of the good guys from her gut microbiome and hadn't replenished them. So that's often a really important part of it. And what can come up in stool tests is, okay, how much of the good guys, what is the beneficial? And it's about the amount of good guys, getting the right amount, not too much, not too little, but also getting the diversity of the different families of bacteria, from Firmicutes to the other families of bacteria that I can't really pronounce because they're really different. Actinobacteria, like all of these different families. And then within the families, you have these species, and your gut is like full of bacteria, and that's what it needs to be. So that's reason number 3. 4, 5? I can't remember what reason. So one reason I do want to address that used to make my eyes roll, and it still sometimes frustrates me when clients come to me, is the aspect of stress. But I want to look at it in a different way. There is a lot of research that looks at how stress impacts and has a contributory factor to irritable bowel syndrome. But something that I think a lot of people don't look at is the idea of trauma and adverse childhood events that's undealt with in the body and how that can impact the gut. So there's a lot of chat on the internet about vagus nerve. So your vagus nerve is a nerve that goes from your head down your back, connects to your stomach and to your heart, and it's basically signaling. It's like this master nerve that sends all these signals through that really impact and give instructions, should we say, to organs. So if you have IBS, then some of the reason will be because your brain is probably signaling potentially to your stomach to not create stomach acid, to not digest food thoroughly. So dealing with stress, trauma, all of these kind of things is a really big part of it. But I have found personally, and with the hundreds of people I've worked with, a lot of people feel a bit fobbed off with this. And so it's a tricky one. I do think it plays a really important role. If your brain thinks it's in survival state, you're going to diminish your digestive activity by a huge amount. Something, I can't remember exactly, but it's something like 70% reduced digestive activity if your brain is in this kind of sympathetic, hypervigilant, stressed, chronic stress state. And that's huge, because your brain is going to be telling your stomach, no, don't make stomach acid. No, don't make that. No. There's too much threat, too much going on. We are not digesting food right now. No. We are preparing to run away from a bear. And logically, why would your body prepare to digest a yummy meal if it thinks there's a bear about to come through that door and eat you? So it's really important that we do, whilst we can feel really fobbed off and it can be used as a bit of a get out clause for IBS, if it's just because you're stressed, it can be really helpful to understand the actual mechanics of this. If your brain is in a constant sympathetic state, though, it's really difficult for you to have thorough chemical digestion. And like we talked about before, if your digestion at the top end of your digestive system is poor, it's going to have a huge knock-on effect going down. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that. That's why things like meditation and breath work and yoga can be really helpful for IBS. But I also want to encourage you, I've worked with so many yoga teachers that have come to me with digestive issues, and they have got the breath work, the yoga, they're doing a lot of nervous system regulation tools, and their gut health is still really imbalanced because they haven't looked at any of these other components. So this is a bit of a reminder to say stress is often one of the root factors, but it's not the only one. And the reason you've maybe felt a bit fobbed off or unheard is that people just assume it's the only factor. And I found in my clinic, it's not the only factor. There's often a lot of other really practical biochemical gut microbiome aspects going on. I feel like I got bitten in the night by something. It's the middle of winter in Scotland. What is biting? What is biting at this time of year? Anyway, let's dive on to the final reason in this episode. Let's first address the biggest mistake people make with IBS is they assume all their IBS symptoms is about the foods that they eat. So when they eat specific foods and they get symptoms, that is the primary reason for their symptoms. That is incorrect. The reason you have IBS symptoms, especially if you've had them for a long time, I'm talking chronic, years, decades worth of IBS, is because your gut microbiome is out of balance and there's probably some inflammation and suboptimal functions going on there. So to get rid of your IBS, you need to improve the function and the overall ecosystem of the entire gut microbiome. Your IBS is not just about the foods that you eat. And that's the trap, the anxiety, the spiral so many people can get sucked into of like, oh my gosh, I can't eat carrots now, and I can't eat peas, and I can't eat gluten, and I can't eat dairy, and I can't eat salicylates, and I can't eat. And I have seen a lot of clients actually slide from IBS into eating disorders because of this false idea that all of your IBS is just about food that you eat. Now, the foods that you eat do contribute to the state of your gut microbiome. So the food you eat matters. Like, I'm a nutritionist. The food you eat matters, of course. But your IBS is not just because, of food. It's because of the state of the ecosystem. And that's such an important thing that I'd love for you to take away. It's about the overall functionality, the levels of inflammation of your entire digestive system. Now, and the foods you eat impact it. So for me, I needed to remove things like dairy and gluten and have more whole foods. So food intolerances, we know from research and just from being human and paying attention, do play a role, but don't get stuck into this anxiety cycle that can lead to quite disordered eating of just thinking, if I just remove high FODMAP foods, gluten foods, this food, that is called managing your symptoms. That is not going to get rid of your IBS for most people, because IBS is about the environment. It's about the entire garden of it. It's not just area. You actually need to look at the entire ecosystem and address the imbalances there. Now, food intolerances play the role. So high FODMAPs food can make symptoms worse for people. Like, obviously food can be a contributing factor, but don't get stuck in let's just remove more and more food and getting stuck into that anxious spiral of, oh my goodness, what have I eaten today? If you're consistently getting IBS symptoms, it's because you need to address the gut microbiome as a whole. You need to uncover the root causes, the reasons for your IBS, address them so that you can actually enjoy food and enjoy eating more food. If you never understand the reasons of your IBS, chances are you'll spend most of your life just managing symptoms, which I did that for a long time and it was totally miserable. So I much prefer being IBS free. But anyway, I hope that video has helped you. I'm sure I will do a part 2 at some point because this is just like touching the surface. If you would love me to go through maybe like a stool test results of what that looks like, let me know in the comments, because I could totally go through, anonymize some results and go through that for you, or go through a sample report so that you can actually see what it can feel like to have some real answers for your gut health. And remember, your gut health affects hormone health, mental health, skin health, energy, focus, cognitive function. So it's really important that when you can understand the root causes of your digestive upset, you can actually feel better just like across the board. And that is so much fun.